Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep into something that's been all over the news lately.
Yeah.
Presidential pardons.
It's been quite a story.
It really has, and specifically we're going to unpack President Biden's recent pardon of his son Hunter Biden.
Right.
And try to figure out, what it all means for the presidency, for the idea of justice, how we balance personal loyalty and the rule of law.
For sure, for sure.
We've got a pretty good mix of sources for this one.
Okay, great.
We've got news articles from CNN, BBC, a really opinionated piece from The Atlantic.
Oh, wow.
And even a Wikipedia entry for some historical context.
That's great to kind of put it all in perspective.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting about this whole case is how it brings together the personal and the political.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a Shakespearean drama or something.
Yeah.
It's
like a real-life House of Cards playing out in front of us.
Exactly.
So just to kind of recap for everyone.
Yeah.
Hunter Biden recently pleaded guilty to tax fraud.
Right.
And lying on a gun purchase form.
Yeah, he said he didn't use drugs when he actually did.
Yeah, about his past drug use. And these charges, they weren't just like, a slap on the wrist kind of thing.
No, not at all.
These could have meant
serious consequences.
Years in prison.
Exactly.
Right.
We're talking...
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially years in prison.
But then...
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
President Biden...
Who had
previously said that he would not pardon his son.
Right.
He ends up granting him a full and unconditional pardon.
Wow.
Which covers any potential federal crimes over an 11-year period.
11 years.
That's
pretty broad.
It's a long time.
It really raises some eyebrows.
It does.
Especially considering what he said before.
Yeah, especially his previous statements on this.
Yeah, and in his pardon statement.
He's essentially saying that Hunter was targeted unfairly because of his family connections.
No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong.
That's a direct quote.
Yeah, he's basically saying that he was singled out because he was his son.
Exactly. He's framing this not just as a legal decision, but as an act of protection against what he sees as a political attack on his family.
Okay.
He goes on to say, there has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober.
Wow.
Even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
It's a very powerful statement.
Oh, yeah.
Very powerful.
Definitely.
But it has sparked a lot of criticism.
Absolutely.
I mean...
There are people who are not happy about this.
Jonathan Chait, who wrote that opinion piece for The Atlantic.
Right.
He doesn't hold back at all.
He does not mince words.
He calls it unpardonable hypocrisy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty strong.
He's basically saying that Biden is choosing his own personal feelings over principles of justice, which could end up damaging public trust in the system.
Yeah. I mean, what Chait's getting at is that regardless of the reasons behind the prosecution, this pardon kind of sends the message that the powerful, they can escape being held accountable.
Yeah. So are we all equal under the law?
Exactly.
Is that really true?
It raises questions about fairness.
For sure. Yeah.
And Chait specifically brings up Hunter Biden's business dealings.
Oh, right.
Where it's alleged that he was basically selling access to his father.
Who was the vice president at the time.
Exactly.
Yep.
Even if no laws were technically broken.
Right.
It's the question of ethics,
Yeah. Does it pass the smell test?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Influence and favoritism.
Yeah.
That's what he's getting at. And Chait's argument is that even if it's technically legal, this kind of behavior erodes public trust.
Right.
It contradicts Biden's supposed commitment to upholding the law.
Okay, so we have this clash between a father's love for his son and the principle of equal justice under the law.
Absolutely. A very complex situation.
Very complex.
No easy answers.
Yeah. And then we also have Stephen Collinson from CNN.
Oh, yeah.
Who takes a wider view.
A broader perspective.
Yeah, he argues that this pardon fits into a larger pattern of the justice system basically being used as a political weapon.
Right. Yeah.
So his point is that
both Democrats and Republicans are increasingly accusing each other of weaponizing the legal process for their own political gain.
Yeah. It's like
This feeds right into
that
that.
never-ending cycle.
Yeah, and whether or not it's actually true, this perception that there's bias erodes faith in the system.
It makes people wonder, can we really trust that the justice system is fair and impartial?
Exactly. And this is especially concerning now with former President Trump back in the picture.
Oh, yeah. That is a whole other layer to this.
Exactly. Collinson even suggests that Biden's pardon might embolden Trump.
Right. Because he was known for pardoning.
To protect his allies.
Yeah.
To issue similar pardons.
So he's saying that this might encourage Trump to do the same thing.
Potentially even for those involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
Wow.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
He warns that if this trend continues, this tit for tat, where each side is using the justice system to attack their opponents,
right,
it could really do lasting damage to public trust in the justice system.
And that's a cornerstone of our democracy.
It is one of the foundations of American democracy.
Yeah.
And he paints a pretty bleak picture, saying if Trump responds to those who he claims weaponize the system against him with further weaponization, it could leave faith in the system irretrievably damaged in the eyes of millions of Americans for decades to come.
So we have the specific case of Hunter Biden.
Yes.
But it really brings up
all these broader concerns.
Yeah, about fairness, accountability, the politicization of justice.
Absolutely.
And to really understand where we are, it's helpful to look back
and understand the present
and see how these presidential pardons have been used throughout history.
Yes.
And that's where our BBC articles and the Wikipedia entry
come in handy.
Come in handy.
They can provide that historical context.
Yeah.
To see how this power has been used in the past.
Right.
What we can learn from those past successes and failures. And, how do President Biden's actions stack up?
Right. Do they fit in with the historical norm, or is he really kind of doing something new here?
Yeah.
So let's dive into that history a little bit.
Okay.
So the Constitution actually gives the president
a lot of power to pardon people for federal crimes.
Broad power.
Yeah. And there have been a lot of cases
throughout history
where presidents have pardoned
family members or close associates.
Exactly like Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother.
Right.
And Donald Trump pardoned Charles Kushner, who was his son-in-law's father. So it's not unheard of.
No, not at all.
But what makes the Hunter Biden pardon stand out is that it's the first time,
to my knowledge,
that a president has pardoned his own son before sentencing.
That's a key difference.
It is.
It raises questions about, what was the motivation here?
Right. Was justice really served? So in a way, Biden is kind of...
He's both following and diverging from historical patterns.
Yeah, it's familiar in the sense that presidents have used pardons for personal reasons before.
Sure. But the timing, the relationship.
Yeah, who's being pardoned, when they're being pardoned.
It's breaking new ground.
It's definitely a unique situation. And that's why it's generating so much discussion.
Right.
It forces us to think about, power privilege, the potential for abuse.
Yeah.
Are presidential pardons really about mercy and justice?
Right.
Or are they just a way for the powerful to protect their own?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question that's been around for centuries.
Yeah.
And this case really puts it under a microscope.
For sure.
I mean, think about it. We're talking about the president's own son.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate conflict of interest.
Yeah, you can't really get much closer than that.
No, you can't. And it's interesting to see how the media is handling it.
Right.
Like the BBC articles, they really highlight how unusual this pardon is.
Yeah, they talked to some experts, and one of them pointed out that it's never happened before.
Really?
That a presidential pardon covers such a long period of time.
11 years.
11 years.
That's a long time.
It's unprecedented.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's not just that he's being pardoned for the crimes he's already admitted to.
Right.
But for anything he might do in the next 11 years.
That's a lot of leeway.
It is.
And it kind of makes you wonder if the rules are different.
Right.
For people who have powerful connections.
Are some people above the law?
Yeah. Are they really held to the same standard?
Exactly.
And it's not just the time frame that's unusual.
Right.
The fact that the pardon was issued before sentencing.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing that's never been done before.
Especially when it's the president's own kid.
Especially with that kind of relationship.
The BBC really emphasized that point.
Yeah, I can see why they would.
It makes you wonder if they followed the usual legal process.
It does raise questions about due process.
Yeah. Was anything skipped or rushed through?
It feeds into that narrative that there's one set of rules for the elite.
And another set of rules for everyone else.
Exactly.
And speaking of narratives...
Okay.
I keep thinking about that Jonathan Chait article.
Oh, yeah, the one in the Atlantic?
Yeah. He sees this pardon as a perfect example of Biden putting his personal feelings first.
Above the law.
Yeah, and he even compares it
Oh, really?
to what Trump did with pardons.
Interesting comparison.
Yeah, it's not a perfect analogy.
Right.
But he's suggesting that maybe this isn't just a Democrat or Republican thing.
Right. It's not about party affiliation.
Yeah, that it's more about power.
It's a systemic issue.
And how it can corrupt.
Yeah, the temptation to use that power for personal gain.
It's like that old saying.
Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it seems like with presidential pardons,
Mm-hmm.
that temptation is always there.
Lurking in the shadows.
Exactly.
So we need to understand the history.
Yeah, that historical context is really important.
Absolutely. And that Wikipedia entry is a goldmine of information.
Oh, yeah, it really is.
It goes all the way back to the beginning of the country.
Yeah, it even explains the constitutional basis
Right.
for these presidential pardons.
So what does it say?
So Article 2, Section 2 gives the president the power to pardon offenses against the United States.
Except in cases of impeachment.
Right, so it's pretty broad power.
Yeah, that's a lot of power.
It is, and the Wikipedia entry gives all these examples
Of our history.
of how it's been used.
They're both good and bad, I'm assuming.
Yeah, like George Washington pardoned the leaders of the Whiskey Rebellion.
Oh, wow.
And Andrew Johnson issued those really controversial pardons
Right.
to former Confederate officials.
After the Civil War.
After the Civil War.
Yeah, that was a tough time for the country.
It was.
And then there's the big one.
The Nixon pardon.
That was a huge deal.
It really was.
Still debated today.
Yeah, people still argue about that one.
It seems like every president has to figure this out.
How to use this power responsibly.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
It is.
And there's no clear-cut answer.
Right.
The criteria for a pardon can be pretty fuzzy.
It's not always black and white.
No, sometimes it's about mercy.
Right.
Sometimes it's about political strategy.
Sometimes it's both.
Yeah, it's hard to say when a pardon is justified.
Yeah, there's no easy test.
No. And the Wikipedia entry also points out
Yeah.
that presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes.
That's right, not state or local offenses.
So that's an important distinction.
It is.
So if Hunter Biden were facing state charges,
Mm-hmm.
this pardon wouldn't do anything.
Right, it wouldn't protect him.
And there's another interesting detail.
Oh, what's that?
A pardon doesn't actually erase the conviction.
So it's not like it never happened.
Right. It's more like an acknowledgement of the crime,
Okay.
but an offer of forgiveness.
So he still has a criminal record.
Yes, but he's been granted legal forgiveness.
And certain rights are restored.
Exactly.
So it's not a clean slate.
No, not exactly.
It's more like a second chance.
Yeah, it's a fresh start in a way.
But the past is still there.
The past is always there.
Yeah.
It's important to remember
Yeah.
that we're talking about real people's lives here.
Right. Not just legal theories.
These decisions have consequences
Yeah. Real world implications.
for individuals, families, communities.
It's easy to get lost in the legal arguments.
Right.
But at the end of the day,
We're dealing with human stories,
human stories.
and those stories matter.
They do?
And those implications go beyond the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
The way presidents use this power
The pardoning power.
shapes how people see the justice system.
And impacts our trust in the rule of law.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It is.
That's why this is such an important issue
To understand.
and to discuss.
Yeah. It affects all of us.
It does.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the impact these decisions have.
Yeah, the weight of the office.
Yeah, and with this Hunter Biden pardon,
Uh-huh.
we're seeing these big questions about power, justice, accountability.
All playing out on the world stage.
Yeah, and it keeps coming back to this question of,
Where's the line between the personal and the political?
right, can a president really separate those two things?
Especially when it's family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it even possible to be objective in that situation?
I don't know. It's a tough one.
It is, and it's fascinating to see how people are reacting to it.
Yeah.
Some people are defending President Biden.
Saying he's just being a dad.
Yeah, they're saying any father would do the same thing.
And then others are saying he's abusing his power.
And that it undermines the whole idea of equal justice.
Right. So you have these two very different perspectives.
And it reminds us that there's rarely a simple answer when it comes to presidential pardons.
No, these are complicated situations.
With so many factors to consider,
Legal, ethical, political,
it's like a puzzle.
with 1,000 pieces.
And just when you think you're starting to see the picture,
You turn over another piece,
and it changes everything.
like that whole idea of a presidential self-pardon.
Oh yeah, I'd almost forgotten about that.
The Wikipedia entry mentioned that.
Yeah, that a president could potentially pardon themselves.
For any federal crime,
It just seems crazy.
it does, but it's never been tested in court.
So it's a legal gray area.
Yeah, and it's come up a few times throughout history.
Usually during times of crisis.
Yeah, when the stakes are high.
But if a president could pardon themselves,
Wouldn't that completely undermine the system?
it would mean they're above the law.
No one to hold them accountable.
It's like something out of a movie.
A legal thriller.
Yeah, with the fate of the country hanging in the balance.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's clear that we've only scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
But I think we've raised some important questions.
Yeah, about power justice, the future of our democracy.
And by engaging with these tough questions,
Yeah.
we can better understand the challenges we face.
And hopefully find solutions.
That will make our country stronger.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
And we encourage you to continue the conversation.
Yeah, keep thinking about these issues.
Because they affect all of us.
And the choices we make today
Will shape the world we live in tomorrow.
So thanks again for listening.
And we'll see you next time.